webinar. Again, this is Ryan Oistach from Five9. I'm joined here today to talk about simplifying Azure management with Five9 and StarWind. We're going to talk about how to make your highly available hybrid cloud even simpler. With that, I'd like to quickly introduce our speakers. So we have Alex Karavanov, our Director of Solutions Engineering from Five9 Software. And we also have Max Kolometsev, who's the Director of Product Management from StarWind. We're going to talk about some really interesting things today, talking about the importance of hybrid cloud, moving to Azure, an Azure hybrid cloud with Hyper-V, and just making the whole process a lot easier for you. Just so everybody knows that this webinar is being recorded, we'll be sending you a link along with the presentation file after the presentation, sometimes, usually about 1 to 2 business days. And then also, if you have questions throughout any time during the presentation, feel free to ask in the GoToMeeting question box at the bottom left-hand corner. There's a question. You can ask those questions, and we'll answer as many as we can at the end. We're going to have about 15 minutes at the end to answer any Q&A. All right, we'll quickly jump into the agenda. We'll begin by talking about, why hybrid cloud's the future, and go through any concerns or questions that commonly come up. A lot of the customers that we hear from Five9 side, and also that we hear on the StarWind side, will address those. We'll talk about the easiest way to get to the hybrid cloud. We'll talk about some cost management and simplifying that management, and then we're going to get into the really good stuff and show you the live demo of this brand new technology that StarWind and Five9 are bringing together to make your lives a whole lot easier. And then at the end, we'll talk about some Q&A. We can answer any of those questions that might be remaining, and if we don't get to them, we can follow up afterwards. So with that, I think that I'm going to kick it off to you, Max, to get everything started.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. And today we're going to be talking about hybrid cloud and discussing what is the best way to achieve all the benefits it gives us.
And before we start, actually, so something I wanted to suggest, Max, so why wouldn't we ask our question on how many virtual machines and applications our today's listeners and attendees are actually using? So
great idea. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Cool. So please let us know, how many virtual machines you're currently using in Azure, and that certainly, sounds like people are actually using that at the moment, Max. So that's going to help us with our today's webinars, and certainly we are going to make sure we adjust our content based on your respondents, guys. Beautiful. It looks like we have majority of our attendees who have voted, so we're going to close it now and switch back to the presentation. Right. Okay. So just we know that hybrid cloud is being more and more popular, right, Max? So just we know that more companies are trying to use it at this moment, but majority of the stories that we hear about are mostly around enterprise customers. I mean, just of the hybrid cloud. So do you think it's actually for everyone at this stage?
So, I mean, the benefits hybrid cloud delivers those are really for everyone. I mean, first thing, you get on-demand performance, capacity, and compute, and you can expand your local applications to the cloud when you need those, and then scale down when you don't need those, which creates a really good and flexible offering. And this goes into something like faster go-to-market. When you want to test a new concept, or when you want to roll out a new service, instead of buying something, you simply provision it in hybrid cloud almost instantly. And people and companies who take advantage of hybrid cloud are much faster with their offers than people who would just be old school and wait till the new server arrives to spin up that new application. And this then transitions into something like lower cost of running IT, because you can validate certain concepts non-disruptively without buying all this extra hardware, without vetting everything and budgeting for it. You just quickly test it. It works, good. It doesn't work, well, we have to redesign it. So it gives you more flexibility, and it also gives you the ability to try the cloud. If you're not certain if you want to move to the public cloud completely or not, you simply deploy hybrid cloud and, let's say, test the waters. It works, good, then we'll migrate more applications to the cloud. It doesn't for some applications, okay, so these applications stay on site. And finally, you get improved business continuity with the cloud, because now you automatically get a disaster recovery location, and also your applications can benefit from cloud storage, which is naturally geographically separated from the main location. So there are a lot of benefits, yet there are also certain issues. Right, so you might be wondering, what seems to be the issue with such a good approach with so many benefits? So first of all, hybrid cloud still bears a very high point of entry. And the solutions we're looking at are typically aimed at enterprise market, because most of the cloud vendors, especially we're currently talking about Microsoft, they think that it's going to be either customer using just Azure, or if he's closer to the enterprise segment, he will be using Azure Stack. And in this particular case, Azure Stack is an offering where customer is required to just swap out his existing configuration, buy new hardware, configure it from scratch, and only use that hardware which is vetted and certified for the Azure Stack. So it definitely narrows down the audience for people who could benefit from hybrid cloud, and especially the part where you need to set it up from scratch and then you have to adapt to management. And Alex, you can tell more about management. You've been solving management problems for people for ages.
Oh yeah, that's true, Max. Yeah, in 5.9 we certainly aim at helping people manage their setups as good as possibly can. So this is our primary focus at the moment. And from what we see at this stage, and especially one of the drawbacks of deploying hybrid clouds is around complexity of its deployment and setup. So there are, of course, several hardware issues that arise, right, that no one really anticipated before. But the complexity of managing hybrid cloud at the moment certainly is something that prevents people adopting that. And what we tend to do here, and this is what we are going to go through as a solution today, right? So we are simplifying the setup to make that accessible for everyone in Hyper-V and Microsoft Cloud world, right? And with 5.9, we would try to show you how to make this management experience a very intuitive one. So because you don't have to be worried about, you know, some complex training to actually build it. No, it's designed to help you, right? So rather than make you suffer and learn, like, you know, for several months before you can start using that. So this is our goal in reducing the complexity and simplifying management. Something that we've also noticed that certainly is one of the goals with our combined solution today, so is about obscure cost structure that hybrid clouds that now out of the box I usually bring it over with them. So you may run it on your premises, right? So this is a special dedicated hardware connected to the public cloud, but eventually realize that some of the costs are coming out unexpectedly. So you just realize that certain transactions have to be built separately, certain traffic has to be built separately, maybe even just certain performance workloads. So this is something that we would always try to eliminate and say, just help you transition your existing environment to a hybrid setup in the way you're used to without anything hidden behind that. So certainly the way we would love to see our customers use that. And also, I think there is a challenge about maintaining the availability of some of this workload. So Max, so how would you actually maintain highly available infrastructure in this kind of a case?
So yeah, in this case, with typical hybrid cloud, you don't get your virtual machines and applications highly available. So let's say if you're running something on premises, there is no way to live migrate it to the cloud and vice versa. It takes time, you need to restart it and stuff like that. So if you want true clustering and high availability, you have to run 2 instances and use what's called a guest virtual machine cluster, which transitions into more obscure cost structure. For instance, if you're running SQL on-site and in Azure, you either have to go for an unlimited flat rate, which is expensive, or to calculate certain like transactions per second and then megabytes you use and then outcoming traffic from Azure. So it becomes more complex. Right, but today we have a solution which is aimed to help with all of these problems. And the idea is to use a combination of StarWind 5.9 and existing Hyper-V infrastructure combined with Azure to deliver hybrid cloud functionality to the existing infrastructure. So on this diagram here on the left, we have our typical existing Hyper-V cluster. It can be 2 nodes, it can be 4 nodes, whatever number of nodes you have. And we have Hyper-V running there. We use 5.9 to manage all resources in a centralized fashion. That's going to be our single pane of glass management. And we use StarWind to replicate storage between these nodes and provide software-defined storage layer for this cluster. And what we actually do, we expand this paradigm to Azure, and now we can migrate our workloads and create a highly available cluster between on-premises and Azure.
And Max, how is it different to the regular hybrid cloud that people know at this moment?
Okay, so the secret sauce here is how it works. So here is our cluster. We've got some virtual machines on site. We've got a StarWind virtual machine in Azure. So that's the first difference. And how we get high availability in Azure, we take advantage of what's called nested virtualization, and we can simply migrate our workloads to Azure and back. And we treat this StarWind virtual machine in Azure as a fully functional Hyper-V host, which is visible in our management console. So we can migrate machines, then we can also back up to the cloud, just run DPM right there on StarWind virtual machine, and then offload it to cold blobs. And also, if something happens to the local infrastructure, we can easily migrate machines or restart them in Azure. Then StarWind proactive support will kick in, fix the local infrastructure, and migrate the necessary workloads back to the on-premises location.
That's a cool term, Max, proactive support. So just what is that?
Hang on, we'll get to it.
Okay. So, but how much we can save with this solution? So, just approximate numbers that we can share with people on how we can bring the cost down in this case.
Right. So we try to simplify the calculations as much as possible. So we don't calculate the traffic, we don't calculate the ingoing, outgoing, and additional services, because this is something all people will use at the end of the day. We try to keep it around the most expensive resource, which is compute. And first example, if we keep 4 separate virtual machines in Azure, that's one cost. If we consolidate them with the help of StarWind, we get about 38% savings on compute monthly.
Oh yeah, that's impressive. 38% difference is certainly over the year. It is a big saving. But can we actually do even more, Max? So can we squeeze, say, more turtles on the rock? So I mean, more virtual machines on the server.
Oh yes, yeah, we can. And let's say we have 8 virtual machines, and we want to consolidate them. In this case, we get about 70% savings. And also keep in mind, these are savings which we calculated where we didn't really do an apples to apples comparison. So we're trying to compare hybrid cloud where you don't have the flexibility to migrate the workloads without turning the virtual machine off and keeping your applications up and running. And with 70% savings or 38% savings, you actually get the premium of having that highly available resource which has uninterrupted access even when you migrate it to the cloud or when you migrate it from the cloud. Okay.
All right. So yeah. So sorry. Just it seems like there are some hidden keys that we forgot to mention that public cloud usually puts on top of their workloads, right?
Yes, and it seems to be a game everyone's playing these days. So free entrance, paid exit, and the same thing is with Azure. Inbound traffic is free, but outbound traffic is about 2.5 cents per gig. And in our case, the outbound traffic is not a big concern because we only do outbound when we migrate workloads from the cloud or when we have to do a major restore. And even then we go to approximately $25 per terabyte, which is not really an amount someone would be worried about.
That's fairly good, right? So, and what about the disasters? So, so how would you handle them in this case?
Well, disasters can happen, and unfortunately, our proactive support doesn't monitor seismic activity as well as wildfires. But for everything else, there is StarWind proactive support. And StarWind proactive support is aimed to change the way traditional support works, actually to make it a 21st century support done right. And here is a quick comparison. So typically, administrator figures out about the problem somewhere here. His boss calls him at the middle of the night saying that the website is down, they cannot sell tickets to the tomorrow's game, and they're losing money right now. Then administrator has to remote in, find the root cause, then narrow it down to a certain component or a set of components, then submit a support ticket to one or multiple vendors, wait, then maybe submit more logs. There is lengthy fixing process, sometimes involving third parties and sometimes involving finger pointing with hypervisor vendors saying it's all storage. Well, the usual thing. We've all been there. And finally, we have resolved the issue.
That's a long way, huh, Max?
Yeah. It is long. Right.
Yeah, that's true. We know that. But so what part do you do, guys? I mean, just is it indifferent to this? No, what do you do out of this?
So we actually strike out this scheme completely. Instead, we are focused at monitoring not failures, but something which goes at the early stage. So there is an issue, and the issue may be what we call a failure pattern, where we have increased latency or increased temperature for a long time, which may lead to a fan failing or something similar. And this triggers an alert, and StarWind Health Monitoring Service notifies us and this automatically creates a support ticket. Then we pull out all the diagnostic information we may need without actually requesting all these logs to be sent to us. We simply use the historic data to see what went wrong and what are the normal stats. Then we involve third party. Let's say we are working on our hyper-converged appliance and there is a problem with a network card. So we call Mellanox and say, guys, are there any problems with the firmware or something like that? And they say, yeah, it may be a small chance that this firmware will help you to make the environment 100% stable. So we know what the problem is. We never finger pointed in front of the customer. We resolved everything using our OEM channels, which gives us better engineers. Then we reach out to the customer for remote access and say that the environment is currently at risk and we need to prevent a failure. Then we resolve the issue and the customer is happy. So customer never submitted a support ticket in the first place. They don't have to submit tickets anymore. Only in case of a major disaster where no failure pattern can predict that the system is about to die. I mean, we could do it if it's an earthquake and all of the hard drives suddenly went to the parking position. We can definitely try to diagnose it that way, but no, it's a force majeure still. But in all other cases, customer simply gets a phone call and say, hey, please pull over at the next highway exit and we will change your tire because it's about to blow. But this is the way we help customers in emergency situations. Most of the time, customers have to face their infrastructure, and we need to help them in their everyday objectives. And as far as I know, most tasks are on the management side, not even on the support side. And Alex, can you tell us a little bit more about making the management and monitoring experience?
Oh yeah, for sure. Thank you, Max, and thank you for giving us deep details on the way we can efficiently provision support service, right, to the customers. So the way we address the management goal, right, for everyone is around providing the enterprise level virtual machine management experience, right? So as we touched today quickly, majority of hybrid cloud users at this stage are coming from the enterprise world, right? So part of that is connected to the complexity of the setup. I know part of that is connected to the costs and resources you have to assign to that. So in 5.9, our goal is to provide this enterprise level management for organizations of basically any size. So it is enterprise VMM experience available to absolutely everyone. So what really sets it apart is the multitude of layers that can be applied to the management infrastructure, right? So in enterprise world, there are certain requirements that are around the availability of the data, right? Availability of the workloads and applications, but it doesn't mean that these don't apply to smaller companies either. So all of this are equally important for organizations of all sizes. So what we do to achieve that is we provide the backend monitoring, remote management with high scalability, and the management model that supports the role-based access control that we're going to speak today in a little bit more detail. So it's a multi-layered approach that actually combines all the management layers that everyone needs for everyday life Hyper-V management activities, including the hybrid cloud. So the architecture of the product has been designed to support the infrastructure of almost any size, including the host allocated remotely, clusters that are located locally, or Azure-based Hyper-V hosts, so virtual machines that run on Azure. And this is what we are talking about today, so about our hybrid cloud solution. So Finance Manager is insensitive to where workloads are located, and that certainly helps you manage everything from one centralized console. So Finance Manager helps you aggregate all the workloads in a central management interface that we're going to have a look today at our demo, and allows you to remove any dependency on the requirement of having a dedicated network to connect to any of the remote sites, and even have them run on different domains if there is a need to do so.
So wait a minute, these can be on different domains, so you can just use the same management console and just manage multiple clusters?
That's exactly the case. So all you need to do here, so you can have each cluster in its own domain, but if you have multiple classes connected to different domains, it's still totally fine with us. Of course, they should still share the same storage, right? Storage layer should be the same for each cluster, right? But if you want to manage multiple of them, that's totally fine with Five9.
And how far does it scale? So how many clusters can you manage?
Oh, that's a good question here. So the architecture has been designed to support thousands of Hyper-V hosts, actually even above that number. That's a lot. I know. That's something that people would rarely have, right? Unless you have big data centers. So whatever number of hosts you currently run, I mean, unless it's above 1,000 hosts, you're totally covered, right? If it is above, just make sure to get in touch with us to make sure we build a best architecture, right? But it can scale as high as 1,000 hosts. And the reason is around the way we connect and communicate with each host agent, basically back to our management service on a very orchestrated manner. And this connection can even happen over the internet. So this is how you get all of your hosts on the single hood, on the single control interface altogether, independently to the real number that you use at the moment. So with that, just of course we know that having the scalability is important, right? So in hybrid cloud, you need to make sure that all of your workloads are running safely and they're highly available. But in general, there are some other operations that people still need to perform on everyday tasks. This is what we call lifecycle management. And this is something that makes people spend most of their time, right? So when you go and roll out new virtual machines, that unless you use, say, templates or automation to provision them, so you may be spending like several hours for each virtual machine. So if a colleague comes to you and asks you to provision a virtual machine, right? So you may be spending hours, and instead of actually going home earlier, you may have to go just and spend more time and actually go even leave later to your family, right? Maybe you're going to the pub. That's also the case, right? So the same goal is with monitoring, right? So you need to be sure about your current resources performance and optimize them whenever that's really necessary, rather than stay late and fix what's happened from the performance standpoint, right? So it doesn't mean that your systems are going to completely go out of business, but when they're performing slowly, you really want to be aware about that and take proactive actions to fix that. So this is what we do with ongoing real-time monitoring and alerts on performance level, as well as the monitoring of the events log on Windows level. Once you're done with that, so you would probably want to save yourself even more time, right, Max? So when you manage your infrastructures, how do you feel about that?
Oh, so I would typically like to offload all the specific operations to people who handle them.
Oh, yeah.
And how do you guys do that?
That's right. So that's right.
Can you help me with that? Yeah.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. And you know that.
That's
So
good.
now you know. So the way we actually allow you to flow the workloads is about separation of duties with role-based access control, right? So within File Manager, you actually get this multiple roles that allow you to assign people with their own resources and their specific roles, which means that, say, if you have someone from one of your departments coming to you and say, okay, I need a virtual machine every day. So eventually you can go and say, okay, here we go, here's your resource, just do whatever you need with that. And please, save my time. I really need to do something else. So when you can give people access to the limited set of operations, you shouldn't be allowing them to take control of all of your key areas of infrastructure, but you still need to make sure that they have access to what they need. So it may be full access for a senior administrator. It may be just stored in virtual machines for your help desk. And say if there is auditor coming in, I just want to show him an infrastructure, you're probably going to give him read-only access to the environment. So all of these roles are built in. You can create your own roles, and we're certainly going to have a look at that today. So whatever workloads are stored, right? So whether they're on premises or they're within our single solution, migrating between on-site and public cloud infrastructure, this is still covered. This is still supported. And probably one last thing here, before we go into our demo here, so is about backup and recovery. Of course, every workload needs to be highly available, right? But we also need to ensure that there is a backup available at place as well. So File Manager has built-in backup and recovery as well. So you can use incremental backup with encryption capabilities. If you need to back up full virtual machine incrementally, this is what File Manager can do for you as one of the management layers. That's great. So before we actually going to go into a demo environment, I have one more poll to you that is going to sound like this. So when do you plan to have a full hybrid cloud implementation? And I see, maximum people are responding very actively. So there are some people who are already using that, which is very impressive, and someone who is planning that next year. That's beautiful. That's great to know. And hopefully we'll be able to get you to some point where you're either going to be able to do this earlier or much simpler and at much better cost structure with our combined solution. Thank you very much for everyone who voted. We are going to continue on with the webinar right now. So Max, so why don't you tell us a little bit more about our demo environment setup at this stage?
We'll definitely do. So giving back our diagram here. So today we have one host, which is physical machine, running Hyper-V, running Pipeline and StarWind. And it is clustered with a StarWind virtual machine running in Azure. And it also runs StarWind in 5.9. And we will show you how the virtualized workload work on premises and in the cloud, and how we synchronize between our two locations, and then how we migrate our VMs and how we do the disaster recovery in case when something bad happens.
Beautiful. Thank you, Max. So we are going to switch over to the live demo right now. So give me a couple seconds to actually pull our demo server.
Sure.
Beautiful. It should be up and running for everyone. So as we are going to go through the setup, so I believe we are going to have a quick look at our storage run by StarWind, right, Max? And then we're going to switch over to this console back to have a quick look at how File Manager does the management part of the virtual infrastructure here.
Right. Yeah. So I will just need to pull up the StarWind management console here and give you a quick introduction into the software-defined storage part of the infrastructure. And Alex, I seem to be having troubles switching window on this side. So if you mind helping me a little bit with the
Sure.
web interface we had there.
Oh, absolutely. Please.
Oh, perfect.
All yours.
Thank you so much. Right. So this is our web management interface, and it connects us to the storage. And StarWind is running on both physical host and the virtual machine in our demo stand, and it is the software-defined storage layer which glues the physical and virtual together. So we virtualize the local storage and replicate it between on-premises and the Azure virtual machine. And in this case, we replicate drives, and we also replicate the RAM cache on top of these devices. So this storage 1, 2, 3 and storage 1, 2, 3 on the Azure side are replicating between each other. So when we select one of these devices, we will see it uses two synchronization interfaces, and one of them is also used for heartbeat. And then that's their current replication is set up to replicate to this device on the local node. And they're synchronously replicating. We use express routes to have good connectivity and low latency connection between our node and Azure. But depending on your configuration, if you have a good low latency link to Azure, you can do it even without express route if you want it. And on the cluster side, Alex, you can now show how we manage everything and where this storage gets visible within 5.9.
Sure, yes, absolutely, and that's certainly exciting. So what basically happens, guys, so you have your storage available for local hosts on your side, right, in your data center, and you have the same storage in a full replica of that within Azure VM. So this is how we get there, and let me quickly show you what it looks like on a cluster level. So the monitoring part is up and running, so you can see the cluster disks that got created and are available for each Hyper-V host. So it really behaves like your standard on-premises cluster, and the way you see that is also absolutely the same. So all operations, all virtual machines are so native to you now, so you don't even have to think where virtual machines are running at the moment. You just manage them on everyday life basis, exactly the same way you would do this inside your own data center. But one of the nodes or two of the nodes of your cluster can be non-running in public cloud with all of its benefits of offloading and disaster recovery when you really need that. So this is how we do this. So first thing, of course, you're going to see all of your nodes. So as I mentioned, File Manager can support almost any scale and a feasible scale at this stage, and we are able to show all of your clusters in a single interface, including all the virtual machines. Of course, we realize that probably some of the virtual machines are, are more important, right? So you may need to get quicker access to them, and especially if you're running like large workloads number, you're probably going to arrange them logically as well. So say if you want to have a quick look and access to your domain controllers across multiple environments, no problem. You can create a logical view to see them all together. If there are certain service or locations that you want to see separately, that's also possible. So you get this quick view, quick management in a centralized console over here. So that's first thing, okay? So it makes it very simple, very transparent to you. You see your cluster, you see all your nodes, you see all your virtual machines. You can do whatever you used on doing with these virtual machines, including operations of connecting to the virtual machines, cloning them. So it is actually absolutely fine. You can get very quick access to your virtual machines consoles, of course, perform all the operations you possibly need in your infrastructure, right? So this is how you perform your management internally, right? So it does pretty much the same if you run a virtual machine on Azure host. So here you go. Here's the host that runs a virtual machine in Azure. Here's the virtual machine. Here's the guest console. You get the same level of experience, the same view, obviously to the server. It is absolutely transparent to you in this case. So on monitoring side, you get this full view. So as I mentioned, you can see this cluster disks, right? So you can see the overview on the data center level, so which shows you whether there are any issues for your hosts or virtual machines and their health. Obviously, it also shows you the storage state, data stores, that this is what we call them logically within the product. And if you need to go and review certain performance within the product, so that's certainly accessible to you. So if you want to go and review CPU performance on your host, no problem. Here you go. That's available. You can go and review historical data. So if you need to review them and get proactively notified about that, so you can configure resource alerts for hosts, virtual machines, and clusters, right? So if you need high, and if you use high availability, this is strongly something we encourage you to do. So you can also set up cluster-specific alerts that allow you to maintain its performance, obviously, and maintain its availability for your systems. Outside of performance alerts, you would also get any event alerts that are related to Windows system. So something that's related to Windows failover clustering, right? Hyper-V, high availability, integration services, everything like this can be monitored by File Manager as well. So you don't have to worry and go to the logs to explore that. You can actually pull this data and actually even get notified if there is a problem that happens with the product on the host. So extra that, I mentioned this multi-tenancy model, right? So role-based access control, when you can actually offload the tasks to your colleagues and give them certain level of access that only they need only at that moment, right? So for that, we use the user standards and roles model. So users allow you to review the current access, obviously, and customize users for each tenant and their resources. But where it really kicks in is about configuring tenants. So if you want someone to gain access to, say, 2 virtual machines only, right, for audit purposes, that's no problem. So you can go create a tenant for that specific task, give this administrator access to the resources, and then you can even go further and limit him to the roles and actions he is able to perform. So these roles, can be fully configurable. You see here is audit set of roles. Here's a help desk. Probably you would need a little bit more. So like resuming, restarting virtual machines. So there are some pre-built ones like full access, basic, read-only, and you can also perform this granular controls on a storage, host, and clusters level. So basically, everything you see in File Manager here can also have this granularity of control. So all the operations that you perform inside the product get also logged in a jobs view, and you can replicate the same tasks via PowerShell as well. So if you're big on automation, no problem. This is something what you can use, and if you want to, you can perform everything you perform within File Manager via PowerShell scripts as well. So that's certainly something that's going to speed up all of the operations, if you're using PowerShell. And probably one quick demonstration just to show you what the Azure host does for you here. We are going to perform a quick live migration of a virtual machine from server, which is located locally in our data center. And let's probably pick up the host explicitly. We are going to live migrate it over to the host that's located in Azure. So what happens at this moment? So we have storage that's synchronized already. So StarWind is synchronized the storage in backend for us. And what we're doing now, so we are basically migrating over memory, so virtual machine can be started over in that host. So just it's going to take a few more seconds here. So while we are waiting for the virtual machine to appear on the Azure host, so Max, is there anything else you want to mention here?
I really wanted to show a lot of different things, but I just realized that we're getting close to the hour, and I would suggest that we do the live migrations, and we would also think we should also get some questions answered. There are plenty of questions from the audience, so
yeah, I can help with that, Max.
Okay, yeah, that's good. And we just saw the virtual machine live migrated from on-premises to the cloud, and we can actually live migrate more virtual machines at a time. All these virtual machines are currently loaded, so we use disk speed, so they keep constant activity, so they're not idle, and we can effectively move them back and forth, and it will not be like moving empty cups around.
Right, so and it's certainly very exciting, Max. It's just great to see this virtual machine migrating really in a few seconds because of StarWind supported its storage in backend, right? So it's certainly very, very intuitive.
And the beauty is that we're just handling it as a regular failover cluster. We're not changing any paradigms here. We're just provisioning our workloads, and if we need to provision certain workloads in the cloud, we can also do that, but we get that cloud flexibility without actually going all in on hybrid cloud.
That's for sure. That's for sure. All right. So with that, I think that's it for today's live demonstration. So that was certainly great to see, and I think it's a good time for our questions.
Sure. So how about I read out, here's a great one to start. There's a little bit of confusion. Is this a StarWind's offering? Is this a 5.9 offering? Or is this an offering for both?
Oh, that's a good question. So Max, do you want to take that?
Right. So it is an offering for both, and so let me separate who does what here. In this case, 5.9 provides decentralized management for the infrastructure as well as the backup functionality, and StarWind is the software-defined storage engine, which allows you to cluster your on-premises Hyper-V host with Azure. So technically, if you want to use it, let's say, with your existing System Center Virtual Machine Manager, you can do it without going for 5.9, but I would still recommend using 5.9 because of the functionality rich interface they have for managing this environment.
Thank you, Max, for sure. And we certainly, as you guys just saw, so we certainly tend to keep that as intuitive, right, as we possibly can. So, and we're actually taking feedback whenever something goes more complicated. So we aim and simplify things as much as possible. So yeah, so as you know, it's a joint solution together here, right? So just together with StarWind, it's just exciting to see how easy hybrid cloud can be with both of our products used together. So this is a combined offering, guys. So just you would use both StarWind and 5.9 to make this really intuitive, powerful transition to hybrid cloud.
Okay, great. So here's another question. In the migration time for a VM, can we have an external NAS or SAN storage attached to the VM?
Yeah, definitely. That virtual machine behaves just as a regular VM. We have the networking stretched between Azure and on-premises. So if we just go a few slides back into the presentation, I will show you where it's done. Give me 1 second, please. Let's see. Right, Alex, you mind switching a few slides back where we have that diagram?
Sure, no problem. Let me do this.
Right, so we've got our software-defined networking layer here, and we've got a virtual gateway, which is connected to the StarWind virtual machine in Azure. So yes, we can we can keep storage connected to the virtual machine while it's migrating. And the only requirement would be to keep consistent latency and to make sure that if you want to migrate a virtual machine with lots of reads and writes to that storage, you have the bandwidth to do so.
Okay, great. And where?
Ryan?
Yeah, it sounds like we lost Ryan.
Can you hear me now, guys?
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you
Yeah,
now.
see, there's that pesky thing when there's a mute button on your microphone and there's also a mute button on the GoToWebinar control panel. You know, it's causes some confusion. So let me ask a question again. Where is the management server located?
So I'll probably take this one. So yeah, Five9 Management Server is located on a highly available virtual machine, usually, so that you would run on your on-premises cluster. So this is just the most common setup, but in general, it doesn't really matter. So as far as you have connection from the virtual machine to your Hyper-V hosts, which can happen even over the internet on port 5671, so we are able to manage them, right? Our recommendation is keeping that virtual machine on management server highly available within a cluster, and that's the best way to use it.
Okay, great. And this might also be a follow-up question for you then too, Alex. This is great for management. What security options do we have?
Okay, so that's an interesting question here. So indeed, I mean, management part is essential, right? And you would consider backup to be part of the security suite sometimes, but something that we also doing in Five9 at the moment is we're working on a solution called Azure Smart Firewall, which allows you to control traffic flow and basically control traffic and firewall rules filtering for all Azure-based virtual machines. So if you're going to run several, StarWind machines, basically with StarWind replicated storage that we're going to use for high availability, and say that's going to be a set of service to have a multi-node cluster, right? So Five9 Azure Smart Firewall can help control traffic and logs for that from any number of subscriptions. So that's possible. I mean, it's a little bit extra on top of what we've discussed today, right? But certainly I realize why question got asked. It's certainly very important to protect the workloads as well.
Okay, great. And then I have a question related to the demo, just some clarification here. Was it a live migration between different Azure regions, or was it a migration from on-prem Hyper-V to Azure?
Okay, so I'll handle that one. And you have your on-premises environment, and you have two virtual machines in Azure. One may be on the East Coast, one may be on the West Coast, and you can still migrate those workloads back and forth between all these three locations. So there are multiple options here.
Okay,
and
great.
that's
Thanks,
certainly
Max.
very flexible. Oh yeah, that's certainly very flexible.
Cool. So, and just a reminder to everybody in the audience, if we don't get back to your questions, we'll certainly follow up because we want to certainly be respectful of everybody's time at the top of the hour. But with the few minutes that we have left, let's just go ahead and continue. For the workloads in Azure, are they continuously syncing storage back to on-prem and incurring the Azure outbound data charges?
Yes, that is correct. So if your environment is designed to run workloads in Azure and synchronize them back to on-prem, in this case, I would suggest using the ExpressRoute flat unlimited data plan. And this will save you on the data changes. And if your idea is to run the workloads primarily locally, but then replicate them to Azure, or let's say use Azure as a flexible location where you can live migrate the workloads or use it as disaster recovery, then you can go even with standard ExpressRoute.
Okay, thanks,
Right,
Max.
and something to add
Alex.
here, right? So just as Max mentioned, so when you perform this replication of the storage back, right? So obviously this happens, but the beauty here that we probably just should go back to the slide here. So the inbound traffic to Azure is actually free. So unless you perform this full migration of virtual machine and you really run plenty of the workloads and the changes over there, it's still a very insignificant data transfer that's happening over there. So you would rarely see virtual machine generating thousands of files every single day. So of course probably thousands is fine, right? Dozens of thousands. So usually it's fairly low. So the most time consuming operation is obviously and data resource consuming operation is to upload the virtual machine to Azure, which is free. So that certainly helps in terms of the costs here.
All right, and I think that we have time for one more question. In which product do we configure software-defined storage? Can it be configured on a non-green filed scenarios? And forgive me if I botch that term.
Okay, so I think this is where I can answer. If it's a brownfield environment, you can still configure it. In this case, StarWind will act as a proxy between your existing storage and the cluster itself. In Azure, it will be a greenfield environment because just spin up a virtual machine and then you replicate the data. But locally, it's still possible to add StarWinds even when you already have some workloads running there.
Okay, great. Thanks, Max. With that being said, I think that we're going to close out today's session because it's 12 p.m. Eastern and it's the top of the hour. If we didn't get back to your question, we have them all recorded and we'll certainly respond through email or some sort of follow-up when we deliver the recording. With that being said, Max, thank you so much for joining us on this webinar today. Alex, as always, thank you. And I'll let you two give your final goodbyes before signing off.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great experience configuring and managing your hybrid clouds with Five9 and StarWind now. Thank you for attending.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Bye-bye.